You probably fall into one of two groups, those who view my guest today as a folk hero, or those who see him as an unpatriotic scoundrel. There was a time in the radical 60s and 70s when it seemed that his name was in the paper at least as often as the president's. And if the names and phrases, Abby Hoffman, Chicago 7, H. Rap Brown, Bobby Seale, the Black Panthers don't ring a bell, you may not know of attorney William Kunstler, and chances are you do, however. What is a Phi Beta Kappa from Yale, from a prosperous doctor's family, a decorated World War II veteran of the Pacific Campaign, doing in such company? He once said that his major accomplishment is that he has survived without being disbarred or thrown in jail. Right now, his most publicized client has 4 legs and is a feline. Has Kunstler snapped his cap? We will talk to him right after this. It's interesting to be sitting here with a man who's been one of the most vilified and also one of the most readily embraced of, I guess, the most active time of our recent past that I remember, the time that, as in the old Chinese proverb, may you not have the ill luck to live in interesting times, the late 60s and 70s. You were, I'll exaggerate a bit in saying that you were named in the paper every day, but it must seem like it to you at times.
It seemed like it to my mother-in-law as well, because she was constantly calling up then and stating, you know, why are you so in the paper? You know, they'll be bombing your home next.
Shouldn't you lie low a little bit, and so on. Are you glad that life has cooled a bit for all of us, and particularly you, or do you miss that as some old doughboys missed the war?
Well, I miss it, but it really hasn't cooled for me because...
I gather that.
Putting aside the cat, I just got off 2 years of Larry Davis in New York, and Matthew Barnwell, the principal who had a hung jury on this crack charge a couple of weeks ago. And I go into representing a federal judge who's being impeached in Washington in the Senate trial. So I've got a lot. Lawyers apparently, unlike movement people who do run out of movement sometimes, they never run out of clients, and therefore we keep going.
How do you explain the apparent discrepancy between your background and the sort of career that might have predicted? The average person who comes from a comfortable family goes to Yale and so on, ends up on Wall Street, or comfortably defending posh clients of a like mind.
Well, that's what my father really wanted me to do. He wanted me to go to law school and become maybe even a congressman, he said, or a wealthy Wall Street lawyer. But I think being comfortable all of your life, I think sometimes changes you inside. You want to do something different with your life than the prosaic route. And I was the strangest of 3 children. I was the oldest. The other 2 were more down the middle of the road. But I was a strange one, and I couldn't understand why my father took money, for example, for treating poor people as a physician. And that always embarrassed me. So, and he thought I was crazy. Maybe he was right. But I just found it difficult to deal with money, with selling professional services. And although the first half of my practice was more or less a comfortable practice on Fifth Avenue, the second half has been this exciting kind of a thing where I don't make much money, but I do have a lot of exciting times, and I feel I'm some way making up for the air I breathe and the food I eat.
So there's genuine philosophy there, and a credo almost. To the cab driver or the English professor who might yell at you, "How come you only defend the scum of our society?" That was the English professor. How did you answer that kind of question? I know you must have gotten it.
Well, they're the people. I don't call them scum. That's a word that they use, of course. You know, I call them clients like anyone else. But the point is that they are the ones that need the defense. They're the ones that need the best legal services. The Ford Motor Company never really needed the best legal services. They could always really get what they want through the power of the dollar. But the Rap Browns of the world, the Larry Davises of the world, the Father Berrigans of the world, they need the best legal services they can get, and people who are devoted to their interests in some way and not just hired guns. And that's where I thought I came in.
Is it possible in the racist society that we live in that you're some kind of genius? I can't imagine how anybody else could accept the assignment of getting off, I know you hate that phrase, all attorneys do, acquittal of a black man who shot at policemen. Now you would think that would be an open and shut case, lost before it ever began. How did you start to think about the technique for the success you had in that case?
But we knew from the beginning that the district attorney never wanted to try that case because he had Larry tried on the murders of 4 drug dealers first, thinking they would get quick convictions and they could drop the police case because there were so many weaknesses in it. And for example, the police had threatened Larry's mother just a month before this famous shootout of November 19th, 1986 in the Bronx at his sister's home. They had threatened her. She had reported it. She had the good sense to report it, and there was a file made in the Civilian Complaint Review Board of the police department. And it had been investigated, and she had been vindicated. So we knew there'd been a threat to kill him. We knew from many of the facts that there were conflicts in the police officer's story as to what happened. We wondered why 24 white officers were sent to get him when all they wanted to do was question him, why they were heavily armed with emergency service people carrying rifles, shotguns, which fired 1-ounce pellets called slugs.
This is one case where the police weren't outgunned?
No, they weren't outgunned at all. They had more than enough firepower. Fortunately, he had a .45. And fortunately for him, when they shot at him and tried to kill him, one of the bullets ricocheted and hit the lock on the adjoining apartment door, so he could escape from his sister's apartment, from which there was no escape. Barred windows and police inside, and escape and get over the wall and get away.
You make it sound like an easy case to win.
I thought it was easier than the drug dealer's case. We got him acquitted on the drug dealer's case because the forensic evidence was so bollocksed up by the police and the testimony was so conflicting. But on the police case, we had a lot of good stuff. They had made tapes, they had given statements. Some 4 of the officers had brought suits against the city, so they had an interest in what was going on. And we had some heavy evidence from a forensic man from the John Jay School of Criminal Justice, a police academy in New York, who testified for us and proved, essentially, who fired the first shot.
Could you take a right-winger of the kind that's almost the cartoon right-winger and convince him, educate him to the fact that if he's really a conservative, he ought to defend someone's right to burn the flag of the United States?
Very hard to do. As you know, I just argued that case in the United States Supreme Court, the flag-burning case, and we're awaiting a decision now.
I guess what I'm asking is, can you ever change that kind of mind, along with what would you say if that were your assignment?
It's difficult because the philosophy is so simplistic that the flag represents patriotism and obeisance to the flag is a good thing to do, a virtuous thing to do. But I'm like Samuel Johnson, who said something about that the first refuge of a scoundrel is patriotism. And I believe that. I think it's used and pandered to by politicians and right-wingers and even middle-of-the-roaders alike. And I don't do that. To me, you're born where you're born, and you try to make your country a better place than it is. Some countries are better than others, but you don't regard them as godlike places. They're not that.
If you do, you begin to do evil things in your philosophy.
I think so, if you elevate them to that status.
But you don't let yourself get into the college bull session thing of it. Don't you see that that's absolutely, that, to protect the right of the person to express his rage by burning the flag shows that we're a great country, we're not afraid even of him. You don't get into that sort of thing.
Except the problem is that he was indicted and charged and sentenced to a year in jail for burning the flag.
Oh, well, yeah.
In this particular case.
I mean, in your private life, you don't try to educate and change people.
Yeah, it's hard to educate because people are so set in their ways. And
but you see that as part of your motive, don't you, in being an
I like
attorney?
to teach. I'm from a center called the Center for Constitutional Rights, which has an educational factor as well as a legal factor. It was founded for Dr. King, and he wanted us to do both, educate and provide legal counsel for worthwhile cases.